Have you spoken to them recently?
Yeah, so I spoke to my mum this morning, which, as I say, these phone calls at the moment are massive because it's a sign that they're still okay. They can give us as much information as to what's happening on the ground, which is limited because they're inside, but you know, overnight they've had a lot of airstrikes, bombs. Some of the bombs are so close to the prison that they're blowing out the windows. So it's a worrying time, but as I say, those calls that we get for 5 to 15 minutes a day just make it, you know, it gives you a little bit of reassurance that they're okay for now, you know, but again, that can change at any moment.
Can you tell me a bit more about what your mother said on the phone?
Yeah, so I mean, it's panic, you know, what's going on. She wants to know what the succession plan is, you know, how does this end, what's the mean to the end? And that's very difficult for me to answer because we don't ultimately know. It's a bit of a weird atmosphere in the prison as well. I mean, some people are quite buoyant because they think that this is the beginning of the end. Tensions are high, as you can imagine. There's two sides of the coin, because when the Ayatollah would always give a speech, you know, at the end it would be down with the Americans, down with the British, and there are people who have lived through that for all of their life, so know nothing else. So there are, you know, there's animosity towards my mum as well. It's getting a little bit dubious. They don't know if they're going to remain in Evin. Craig has been told he may be transferred somewhere else, which has really started to put the fear in us, because you read reports online that the IRGC are taking political prisoners as almost human shields to their strongholds.
So you're hearing that they might be separated?
Yeah, I mean, they're already separated, so they're held in Evin, but in separate salons, as they call them. But yeah, for the first time, you know, they may be separated. Well, actually, for the second time, because when they first got moved to Tehran, they were in separate prisons. But yeah, we got reports through that Craig may be getting moved, which, as I say, is worrying.
Yes, scary.
Yeah, for sure. Because we just don't know what that means, and whether or not it's just a threat or if they're going to follow through on it. So, as I say, every day we have to take the information that comes as is and then react off of it, which is difficult because in these moments you want to be as proactive as possible, but you have to react to the news. So, yeah, we take each day and each call as it comes for now. Grateful that we can still receive them, but we are expecting those to be cut off.
How are they making the calls?
Directly from the prison phone. I mean, it took a long time to get that. I didn't hear their voices for, you know, the best part of 9 months. And they had to go on hunger strike to get these calls. So it wasn't an easy process by any means, but since late November, we've managed to have pretty much daily calls, and that's been a direct call to my phone. So, you know, grateful for that at the moment. As I say, expecting it. And I know for a fact when those calls stop, the anxiety is going to go through the roof because you're just going to be thinking the worst. But for now, we have to just be grateful that they are coming in.
In terms of the strikes, what have they been hearing?
Yeah, so I mean, continuous jets going over, bombs hitting the city. As I say, one was close enough that it sort of shattered the windows and the ceilings. I mean, it is a very, very scary time for them. They've also noticed a change in the guards, so there's been less prison guards, more armed police. I mean, I don't get to see it front on because they're locked away in the rooms, but you know, there's been notice that, you know, there's definitely a step up in armed police in the prison and the area. And apart from that, you know, there's other things that we worry about in the fact that if this is going on, are they still going to get their basic necessities? Is food still going to be delivered to the prison? You know, there's layers to the complexity of it all. And as I say, it all adds to this pot of anxiety and worry, and it's just, you've got to try and limit it and be strong for them because they're showing incredible strength themselves, right? That's the one thing that's heartbreaking but inspiring at the same time, is how they're dealing with the situation. I think they are taking it minute by minute. You know, in this moment, I'm okay, is the philosophy.
Is there a concern that they could be used as a human shield or as some sort of bargaining chip as this conflict progresses?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is that they were taken as bargaining chips to begin with, right? They aren't guilty of spying, they're not spies, they've been charged to 10 years for espionage. And if you look at how the narrative normally goes with Iran when it takes foreign nationals, this is pretty much by the book. I don't think it was an opportunistic thing, I think it was planned. And yeah, it's, for me, yes, I think they're being used as bargaining chips at the moment. or up until the war started. And how that now transpires, I don't know. But what we do hear is reports that the IRGC are taking political prisoners to IRGC strongholds and using them essentially as human shields against airstrikes. And then you hear that Craig might be moved, and that starts to trigger alarm bells, right? So we have to hope, you know, in this hands, hope, optimism that that will not happen. The reality is that it is a possibility, you know.
The armed guards at the prison, is that in addition to guards who are already there? So are they reinforcing the prison?
This is only from reports on the ground, so it's not from my mum or Craig, this information. This is from what's coming on the ground, and the general information we're getting through is that the prison guards have started to step down, and the armed guards and the CPA and the armed police have stepped up. It's hard to get confirmation on that, as I say, because they don't really get to see that much, but there's multiple reports coming out of Iran that that's happening. And there is a general indication from inside the prison that that's also happened. So once I get that verified, I'll obviously, you know, be able to share that wholeheartedly. But at the moment, it is the concern that that's happening.
In terms of other prisoners that they're with, how is that going for them?
Yeah, so Craig's in with other political prisoners, so he's in with like German nationals, Romanian nationals, you know, there's a lot of nationalities within Evin prison. I think there's still some dual US nationals as well. My mum is in predominantly with the Iranians and the protesters, so they are having stark contrasts in their experiences. You know, Craig's able to make friends, communicate, have conversations. It's a lot tougher for my mum. They can't speak the language. It's very broken English. I say there's some very hostile people. So, yeah, very, very different experiences at the moment. And one that is having a toll on, you know, my mum harder than it is Craig. I mean, they're both in a horrendous situation. But if you can create a bond with people, it makes that time durable, right? You can get by. And I think there's days when my mum just does not leave her bed, understandably so. It must be very strange to be in a room full of people but yet feel so alienated and alone. You know, that as a human being just must be the worst experience, and she's a wand for connection, and to be stripped of that, I think, is really having an effect on her.
What did you think when you heard that these strikes had begun?
I mean, panic is the first thing. You know, it was like a massive pit in my stomach. I couldn't sleep. I was crying inexcusably, just non-stop. Because you naturally think the worst, right? You know, your mind says, oh, well, they're outside of Tehran, they're away from the danger. But then you go back to June of last year and the prison was bombed. So it doesn't mean they're safe by any means. It's just worry. You know, the first and foremost thing that you want for them is for them to be safe, and then we want them safely returned home. But their safety is paramount, and you know, there's no actual way of guaranteeing that, and that is very tough to take. You know, as a son listening to his mum in a precarious situation and being helpless in aiding her is one of the hardest things I've ever experienced, to be honest.
Have you been in contact with the British government, with any other officials?
Yeah, so we've been in contact with the Foreign Office, who have been... I want to be careful with how I say this. I mean, they've been good at communicating what's going on. They've been well equipped to deal with our emotions. And then I try and cast my mind back to something that they've done that is positive, and I struggle. And that for me is disappointing. You know, I look at other world leaders and leaders of countries who advocate for their citizens, and they do it publicly and with passion and spine and grit and determination that they want to get them home. And when you don't see that with your own government, it's worrying. You have to trust that there is quiet diplomacy, but that only goes so far. You know, it hasn't really got us anywhere. So, yeah, you know, I think Trump made a comment that he's not dealing with Winston Churchill, and I think it was different times, you know, it might be a different approach, but we have to look at what's going on, call on our allies, and I don't call on Donald Trump as a politician, I call him as a son to make sure that my parents' safeties and return is done and it's just. But it's a shame that I can't say that of my own government, at the moment. And I probably won't ever do that until they're home. That ultimately is when their job is done. But they do have a duty of care to their citizens, and at the moment I don't feel that that's the risk that they're at is being reciprocated with the level of importance that this is in Parliament at the moment.
So what exactly are you asking of the American government?
I think it's, the UK have been allies with the US for a long time now, and this is just on compassionate grounds, right? This is two innocent UK citizens who were supposed to be in Iran for 4 days, travelling the world, who have been caught up in an absolute mess. And what we would like to see is a resolution. There's a reason that Donald Trump's gone in there. The regime that's in power at the moment is not a nice one. There has to be permanent change for the country of Iran. And on the back of that, and the permanent good change, I'm hoping is the release of political prisoners, UK, US, others as well, that are, around Europe and the world. So I would, to say that they are there, that they need help, and I implore President Trump to help them.